remember thinking, you're drowning, you're dying, this is it, this is the end. And I'm underwater, and at that point, everything stopped, and a voice saying, they're gonna be okay. And then what I do remember next was being in the boat and not being able to breathe. And we're in the middle of the rainforest. There's no way out of here. There's 28 miles of river is our only exit. I'm a forensic pathologist and a neuropathologist. And, I've conducted thousands of autopsies, investigated thousands of deaths, cut thousands of brains as a neuropathologist and a neuroscientist. I was a professor of anatomy and neurobiology at a big medical school in Boston, and had all the academic checks. I won teaching awards and written books, so it was that was the focus of my life at the time, and it was work. So that's kind of where I was. Philosophically, I was an atheist, hardcore. You couldn't convince me otherwise. And with my work, just really reinforced that, because I can cut a brain and I can put it out for you, and I'll ask you, where is consciousness? Where is the soul? This doesn't exist. There's no proof for it in this brain. And everything that we think about as that process of consciousness, death, is the dying brain. And it can be very easily explained through hypoxia, the chemical reactions that happen as the brain begins to die, which do happen. But we get into confusing awareness with consciousness, but that's maybe another day. So that's where I was, at the time. It was my wife's 50th birthday, and we had gone to Costa Rica, go on this whitewater rafting trip, and I'm terrified. And I should preface the story a little bit with the idea that I grew up in Maine, or always around lakes and water, terrified of water, I hate being around it. I was always terrified I was going to drown. I always found excuses to not be in the water because I just always felt like I was going to drown. The other thing I used to do, and I never put these pieces together until after this, and this might make sense after the story, I used to get really bored in school. One of the things I would do is I would hold my breath, watch the second hand on the clock, see how long I could hold my breath, and then try to beat that record. And that's how I spent most of my elementary school. And I always thought, someday I'm going to need this. So fast forward to 30 years, 40 years down the road, and I'm on this whitewater rafting trip, and it was one of the most technically difficult rivers in the world. And we had our 10-year-old son with us, which I'm thinking, as we're going down this river, this is probably not great parenting, but he had a great time. And we flipped, and I went under. And, I didn't panic. I did all the things you're supposed to do, put my feet up and coming through the rapid, and I thought, this is kind of fun, and bouncing around these big waves. And then I got pulled under a couple of times. I got caught in a hydraulic, and I couldn't get out. I was stuck at the bottom of the river. And I came down several times, and there was a point, to the chase of the story, there was a point where I was drowning, and I knew it. And I thought to myself very clearly, I remember thinking, you're drowning, you're dying, this is it, this is the end. And I was thinking, shouldn't I be more upset about this? This is actually very calming. And I thought about the autopsies I'd done on people who had drowned, and I thought, well, this is a lot what you read about in books. This is supposed to be a very peaceful way to die. And then I remember thinking, well, what the heck is taking so long? And I'm underwater, and at that point, everything stopped. And I was next to this huge boulder, and which was under the water, and all the bubbles had stopped. Everything stopped. And I moved my hand through the bubbles, and they all just sort of moved around my hand in this very kind of weird way. And then there was this bright light. All this is happening simultaneously. I used to think it's very cliche, like a sunset or a sunrise, but it wasn't like that. But these are the only words I have in English language to explain something that's outside of normal human experience. I don't have the words for these. At that point, I was able to see everything around me, 360 degrees. And I see it, but more of experiencing it more than seeing it. I knew that my wife had been pulled out. I knew it was a yellow kayak. I knew it was the guy down the river. I knew my son was in the other boat. I knew the boat behind me was coming to get me. I knew that I had a family member that was going through a very difficult personal crisis that I didn't know about, that I knew about, and I knew it was going to be okay. So that was very sort of happening while I'm in this light situation, and just this incredible overcoming feeling of love, and a voice saying, they're going to be okay. So I get really emotional still, not because it's upsetting, but because I'm in that moment of that beauty. It was just so beyond experience. And I knew my family was going to be okay. And the voice said, they don't need you. You're going to be fine. And that was sort of a moment where I just was, this is amazing. And they just kept repeating, they're going to be okay. They don't need you. You're done. Good job. At that point, the voice in the back of my head was shouting, you're just hypoxic. You're just hypoxic. Hold your breath. You have to beat your record. You have to beat your record. And at that point, the light just sort of vanished. There was a giant sucking sound, and I slammed up against the rock and popped out of the water. When I came up, the boat behind me was almost to me, but I couldn't see anything. I say my vision was like a Viewmaster, one of those old Viewmasters. I could see, and it was gone. See, and it was gone. I couldn't see motion. And we were through that rapid. And as the water slowed and the boat came up to me, the guide in the boat put the paddle out for me to grab. And I remember reaching up and being, in moments of blackout, thinking, if I don't grab this paddle, I am done. And that's the last thing I remember. And then what I do remember next was being in the boat and not being able to breathe. And we're in the middle of the rainforest. There's no way out of here. There's 28 miles of river is our only exit. And so I immediately slip into this emergency medicine mode, ABCs, airway, breathing, circulation, trying to see if I'm okay. I'm the only doctor for hours, right? And I'm really worried about if I have water in my lungs, because that can cause problems later down the road in the next 24, 48 hours. You can have intense inflammatory reactions in your lungs that can kill you. It's called near drowning. But I felt okay. I didn't feel like I had any water in my lungs. What I realized had happened is I had a laryngeal spasm, and it's something called a dry drowning. So the water irritates your voice box, it closes off, and it's a reflex, and there's nothing you can do about it. And I remember being in the boat, trying to breathe and thinking, that's really great, Cummings. You survived it, you got in the boat, you die in the boat. Typical. So knowing that this is a reflex, I'm trying to calm myself down, and I start being able to get little breaths in. And eventually I was able to breathe. We continued down the river like nothing had really happened. And I didn't really think much of it the rest of the day because, I got my son, I got my family. I'm trying not to be freaked out by this. And that night when we got back to where we were staying, I remember looking at my Apple Watch, because I'm a kind of a health freak, and I'm obsessed with my heart rate, sleeping heart rate, resting heart rate. And so I have a constant awareness of my heart rate. And I looked at my Apple Watch, and I had 8 minutes of unrecorded heart rate in that time period. Now, it takes the caveat, it's an electronic device, sure. It also takes the heart rate at intervals. So at least in those 8 minutes, I had a period of time where I had no registered heart rate. It never happened before in that watch. It never happened after that in that watch. It didn't happen the rest of the time. We were on the river. And at that point, I started to think something happened. And continue with the vacation. The next day, we're going down the river, and I'm a little freaked out by being in the river at this point. And we're paddling down. My son says, "Look at that butterfly on the boat." And I look over, and it's this huge blue butterfly. And I said, "Finn, that's not a butterfly. That's a bird." He said, "No, it's a butterfly." And it was so big, and it was a blue morpho. And I didn't know anything about this butterfly until way later, about couple of years later. And it followed us the entire 28 miles down the river. Everybody saw it the whole way. The next day, we were rappelling down some waterfalls. And I don't mean beside them, in them, right? This is my wife. This is a survivor vacation. So we're rappelling down 150-foot waterfalls, and there's the blue morpho by my son the whole way. And so we called it angiogram because my mom died a number of years ago. But so that was really profound. I didn't know about that until coming back. Which is kind of where I'll jump to the after effects. Also vacation, didn't really have much on my mind when we came back. And I started to notice I was having a lot of problems with time, judging time, estimating time. And you know how you're doing something, you get lost in it, and you forget how much time you spent. That was every moment of my day. And it wasn't so much a problem on vacation, but when I went back to work, when I had a really heavy lecture schedule, I had labs and places I had to be, trains I had to catch, it became a really big problem. I was late for things. I would forget, I would be on my way to teach a class and I'd run into somebody in the hall and start talking, and 30 minutes would go by. So as I started to notice these time things happening, I realized that something was different. I became very uncomfortable with my career pursuit. Those things weren't important to me anymore. I've written a couple of very bad novels, horror novels, but I say that I was the best character I ever created because I was this piece of paper, and I couldn't identify with that anymore. Those things weren't important to me. And here I was in this intense Boston, malignant academic environment, and it made me physically ill. I just couldn't be there anymore. Jumping off of that, we ended up moving to Maine, where we're from, living in the woods and having a great life. But the after effects were very difficult, and I didn't have a way to deal with it. Yeah, I think I had a hypoxic brain injury, and it's called dyschronometria, and I have difficulty. I have many ways to cope with it now. It doesn't affect my life, but that was really the catalyst for me to figure out what happened. That pushed me to do what I say, I'm doing my own death investigation of my own consequences of that action. It led me to an incredible world of research that I had no idea existed. Jeffrey Long's book was so incredible. The thing that was the most important for me in terms of turning the corner, because it was a very intrusive, negative experience that I did not want in my life. It completely derailed everything. I changed my course of my career, my life, my relationships. It's difficult to talk to people about it. It's alienating. When I did try to tell people about it, it was like, oh, that sounds really, really horrible. It's a good thing you're still here. Let's get a beer. It wasn't like I needed you to understand it. I just needed you to hear it because I needed to process it. But the thing that really turned the corner for me was Elaine Stout's paper, 6 Challenges Faced by Near-Death Experiencers. That was probably the most profound thing I've ever read in my life. And every single one of those, yes. 75% of people who experience have a very hard time integrating this into their lives. And I knew nothing about these experiences other than what I'd seen in movies. I thought everybody came back and it was beautiful and they loved God and you quoted scriptures and everybody was happy, and it was the opposite for me. And so I had a really hard time reconciling that. And so the Stout paper really made me feel very good about where I was and trying to, I'm a newbie. It's only 3.5 years or so post my experience. So I'm still trying to figure this all out. And I'm no great expert or pontiff on it. I'm still struggling. But what it really taught me, I think really having this issue with being able to separate from time allows me to understand that what we do is we put great importance on the past and on the future. And we focus so much on those two things. That's where our importance is. But the value is here, right now. And getting out of those boundaries of time allowed me to put the importance where the value is and where I am right now. The people I'm with right now. The gift of death is teaching the ability to let go and to be alive. What's the point of music? The point of music is to listen. What's the point of life? The point of life is to live. And that really helped me come to grips with who I am as a husband, a father, a human, my place on the planet. So that's been incredible. And I think as physicians, we all try to practice this thing called evidence-based medicine, which we need data and proof to treat patients so that they can get the best care possible. And through that, we really pathologize death. We sterilize it. We try to prevent it. We medicalize it, and we shield ourselves from it. Funerals happen very quickly after death. It's very fast. No one sees the body, and you go very quickly back into life. We're not experiencing death. We've made it so sterile and kept it behind this curtain that we don't get a chance to really experience and celebrate the transformation that is happening. And I think as physicians, it's not I think back to all the times as a forensic pathologist, I knocked on doors to tell people that loved ones were dead. I brought people down into the morgue to identify bodies. I've sat with families in very horrible circumstances. And the number one question I've always been asked is, did they suffer? And as a physician, you always say, no, of course not. This was sudden, and we try to comfort them. But I always felt like a liar because I don't know. Right? Now I know. And I wish I could talk to those people again and say, look, this is beautiful. I mean, even under these horrible circumstances, the horrible circumstance is second. The process after that there's nothing to worry. I say that no amount of worry will transform your future. No amount of grief is going to transform fix your past. And you just have to be where you are right now and love that. And I think that is kind of where I am with it now.
As I was lying there on the hospital gurney with my eyes closed, I began convulsing. I thought to myself, I'm dying. This is what it feels like to die. And right at that moment, I popped out of my body. I was no longer attached to my body, and the pain was completely gone. I was so detached that I then noticed that I was up on the ceiling, and I was looking down at the scene below me, and I could see my body lying there on the gurney, but I could see that my essence was no longer a part of that body, that it was just the shell of who I am. My NDE happened on August 22nd, 2008 at 1:20 p.m. I had just turned 34 years old, and I woke up early that morning in an unbelievable amount of pain, and I was burning up from a very high fever. I could barely move. I was in so much pain, but I was able to reach for the phone to call a family member to be taken to the emergency room. I had just come out of having a CT scan, and I was taken to a part of the emergency room. I was in a tremendous amount of pain, and I had been for several hours that morning, so I had been through a lot. The pain was increasing, my fever was getting worse, and I was very weakened from being in so much pain for so long. And so as I was lying there on the hospital gurney with my eyes closed, I began convulsing. My head had so much pressure in it, I could feel the veins popping out. I felt like my head was going to explode. And right when I knew I couldn't take anymore, I went very internal. I disconnected completely from the external world, from everyone that was around me, from everything that was outside of my body. I thought to myself, I'm dying. This is what it feels like to die. And I wasn't scared. It was just a very matter of fact knowing. And right at that moment, I popped out of my body. I was no longer attached to my body, and the pain was completely gone. I was so detached that I then noticed that I was up on the ceiling of the room that I was in, and I was looking down at the scene below me, and I could see my body lying there on the gurney, but I could see that my essence was no longer a part of that body, that it was just the shell of who I am. I saw the people around me scurrying around. I felt their various emotions of being frightened, being bewildered, wondering what was happening, moving into action, assessing. And I just looked at this strictly from an observer's perspective. I was just noticing and almost taking note of what was going on. And I started floating up, and I saw these little balls of white energy pinging around and bouncing around. And those were the souls of everybody that was in the hospital. And I saw how each ball of white light, how each soul was connected by a thin iridescent line. And that's oneness and the way that we're all connected. And then that's when everything started to speed up. And I felt myself very quickly going into the tunnel. I felt like I was on a roller coaster because it was fast and you don't know exactly what's going to happen, but it's exhilarating and it was exciting and almost joyful in a sense of, oh, I wonder where this is taking me. And the tunnel ride was very brief. And then I immediately dropped out of the tunnel into the white light. And the tunnel was very dark, very black inside. So then to be suddenly in this bright, beautiful white light, it took me a moment to adjust to it. And after I had a moment to adjust, the very next thing that I felt was a tremendous amount of love. Love that even I get emotional even talking about it today. It was the most pure, unconditional love I have ever experienced in my life. You know, it was love for me that no matter what I had ever done in my life, what I had ever been through, it was just pure and unconditional love for me. The closest I've ever come to that feeling of love on earth is when my daughter was first born, and I had her after my NDE. The first time she was handed to me and the first time that I held her, I remember looking in her eyes and she was looking in my eyes, and that love that I felt for her and that I could feel that she felt for me, that her soul could feel for me, it was very pure and it was very unconditional. The love in the light is even bigger and deeper than that, which is really hard to wrap my head around as a human being. When I was out of my body during my NDE, I was stripped of ego. I was stripped of the limitations of my brain. I was stripped of the limitations of my body. And the light that I was in didn't have any of those limitations either. And so there was enough room for this complete, deep, unconditional, pure love. I had this realization that that is me also, that I am that love, that we human beings, we are that love. Every soul is that love because we are one with that light as well. It's just when we come into our bodies and onto planet Earth, we get that what's perceived as a separation, but the separation, it's just an illusion. And so as I was soaking up that love, I realized that that's also who I am too, and that I'm always one with that, and that I had never been alone, even though I had felt alone many times in my life, that light and that love had always been with me. Part of the peace that I experienced was that even though I had been in a tremendous amount of pain during the hours coming up to my near-death experience, I forgot about all of that pain once I was out of my body and in the light. And I know there's a big fear of death. And I also had a fear of death, of what would be next. And I think a lot of us too also have a fear of how we will die. Will it be quick, or will we have to go through a lot of pain or illness? And a lot of the peace that I had once I was in the light was that whatever I had to go through in order to transition out of my body, even though it was a lot of pain, it wasn't even a thought at that point. It was just something that was in the background for me. And so there's a lot of peace in knowing that death isn't the end. Life is just a chapter. And however we do ultimately transition out of our bodies, there's nothing but peace and love that waits for us on the other side. I did not want to go back into my body after that beautiful experience that I was having in the light. That was the only place I wanted to be. I heard the firm but gentle and loving voice say, "You need to go back." And I continued to protest and try to get my way and say that I wanted to stay longer. But I knew that it wasn't a negotiation. And yet, as I continued to protest, I felt myself get nudged, lovingly nudged back into the tunnel, very quickly backwards through the tunnel. And then next thing I knew, I was back into my body. I re-entered my body through the top of my head, and then I was fully in my body long enough for me to register that I was back in this world, that I was no longer in that white light. The pain quickly returned, and then I was unconscious for several hours until much later that evening. I eventually found out the next morning that I had a kidney stone that got stuck in my ureter. So all the toxins that typically are filtered out from your kidneys, all of those toxins were going back into my bloodstream. And my entire bloodstream had become severely infected. My internal organs were infected, systematically shutting down, and I had gone into septic shock. I saw a couple of family members that looked very frightened, very concerned. Medical staff was there, my surgeon was there, and I wanted to tell everybody, don't worry. If I was supposed to die, if I was supposed to be dead, if this was the end for me, I would not have been sent back, but I wasn't able to do that. Honestly, took several years to process a lot of what I really learned during my near-death experience and what I really learned when I was in that beautiful, the white light. And it was really the knowing that all is well. When we're in our bodies, the saying that all is well, it doesn't make sense to us. When we're here in our bodies, we don't have a complete picture of what's happening. We don't see all of the pieces that are going on. And when we are out of our bodies, when we're in the light, when we've transitioned out and we are stripped of ego and the limitations of our brain and the limitations of our body, we have that 360-degree perspective. And when you have that 360-degree perspective, when you have the complete picture, when you see the complete picture, saying that all is well makes perfect sense. And that continues to bring me a lot of peace as I'm back in my body. There's a quote that I love that always helps to keep me in that peaceful place of all is well and in the peaceful place of flow. And it's, nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished. And there's so much truth to that. We can just get out of our own way long enough to allow that to be. And so I was very motivated after my NDE to look at my trauma and to heal my trauma. And healing isn't always fun, but it's so worth it because you want to have those holes filled back in and you want to feel complete so you can live in the peace of being your true and authentic self. And so you can experience the abundance and the love and the joy of really being in alignment with your soul's purpose. Your trauma is your clue for knowing where your healing is. And our trauma and our conditioning, it's what we learn from. And our parents and our caregivers, I truly believe that they did the best they could with what they had. It's taken me a while to be able to say that and truly believe that and to heal any resentments that I might carry with me. Once you get there, there's a lot of peace in that too. And if we can all look at our traumas, look at our wounding, and do what we can to heal that, our holes will start to get filled back in, and the wounds will be healed, and we will start to feel complete here on earth so we can live out our true purpose. Where you are in each moment, that is your purpose. And there's a lot of peace in knowing that. If you're having a bad day, or if you're having a good day, if you yelled at your kids that day, or if you had a great day with your kids that day, You are always in your soul's purpose because we are here to learn. We are not meant to be perfect every single day to fit the definition of being in your soul's purpose. We're all learning, we're all evolving, we're all progressing along our path. And while we are here to learn, school is earth. The earth is school, and it can often feel like the school of hard knocks. It's not all serious. Every school has a playground. So go out and find your playground and have some fun, because it's not all meant to be serious. And we do need to lighten things up sometimes. If you've ever watched a group of children on the playground and they're trying to think of a game to play, they're inventing a game to play. They have so many different ideas and they are bursting with excitement to start the game. But then if you look at a group of adults that got put on that same playground to invent a game, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to think of everything that could go wrong in the game. And what will we do if that goes wrong? And what is the rule around this? And what's your role? And what's your role? That's very serious. And sometimes that's needed. We could learn a lot from those children that are getting together as a group to have fun and to play a game and to just do what feels good. There's a lot of learning in that for us. We do all have a purpose in each day. We all have an ultimate purpose. And sometimes that purpose is just in being. You don't have to be doing all the time. Being is oftentimes all you need because it allows that flow. It keeps you from getting in the way all the time, where the beauty that's trying to unfold in your life and the people's lives around you, and your soul and your intuition and your higher self is always there to guide you and to show you synchronicities and to open doors for you and to close doors that aren't meant for you. And just getting quiet enough and continuing to work on your healing so you can hear the wisdom of your intuition coming through. Your soul knows you. Your soul knows whether you're going to hear the message today or 6 months from now or 6 years from now. Your soul already knows. It's never going to rush you. All you need to do is just try to get quiet enough